Hello, this once again is Hasenbraten from pokerstrategy.com. I'm making a video of 4 tables, no limit, $5 on Titan Poker. As you can see, pre-flop we'll be playing by a starting hands chart, which of course means we fold king queen offsuit against the steel raise. And, well, post-flop I'll of course try to do my best and see how far we get with it. Yes, that's basically it. So let's get down to the action. 10-6 offsuit, of course, will be folded, as well as Jack-7 off will be. 9-3 suited, of course, will be folded too. And that's basically been it for the moment. So we get another hand here. Deuce-8 offsuit. Of course, it's not really worth playing. You might wonder why those windows always pop up. It's just because to start this video I sat down on the waiting list on almost every table on this limit to get 4 tables running as fast as possible. And well, since I do have 4 tables now, I started, but I have not left all waiting lists so far. So maybe once or twice you will see this window again, but I can just remove myself from the rest of the waiting lists, which I already did. Well, let's get back to the tables. Queen-7 offsuit, not listed in the starting hands chart, not worth playing at all. Can easily be just folded. Here we have a nice queen offsuit. Way the best hand by now, but possibly still not good enough to be played. If somebody raises, we will be folding by chart. But if nobody raises, we're going to raise usually. Oh no, we're not. We're just checking. Wow. Okay, this is tight. I sometimes even I sometimes am impressed by how tight this chart is. But indeed it could be a tough spot raising here out of position against multiple limpers, and then post flop you can have you already can have some kind of a decision whether or not to make a continuation bet. Here I'm going to raise because I do have top pair good kicker, but the flop is really bad, especially in an unraised pot. I can easily be drawing dead here, and I just want to know where I'm at. If I get like called like here in 2 spots, I can basically just mug my hand, and this hardly sucks, but I don't think I can call even 1 to 20 here profitably, because I don't think I'm ahead like ever. And even if I'm ahead, I don't think if I can see a showdown, if he maybe does not decide to bet bigger on the river where I can't call. So I make some kind of tough fold on the turn. And this kind of looks like I'm beat. Well, full house of course beat the flush, but I expect him to have the flush pretty often. Anyways, I didn't have the best hand on the flop, neither on the flop nor on the turn, but I'm still interested. Here, well, here of course the nut flush. So my raise was correct against him, but as I said, since I got this call of a raise, of a bet and a raise, especially on this turn card, it's very likely that I'm beat. And he of course completely misplayed his flush draw with the pair and then his nut flush on the turn. He just put in 4 cents when he was ahead, and then he put in his remaining stack when the full house came, and of course got called by the full house. and then lost all his chips. all his chips. Well, oh, I missed one of those. Sorry. Of course, some kind of ridiculous play, but it's more or less what I expect lots of people to do on low limits, because many people here don't play poker that as much as, for example, I am doing it, and hopefully not as good as I am playing. And that's why I'm making this video, to teach you a bit of how to play poker on no limit hold'em. Well, this table down here gets kinda short. We have 6 players left right now, so maybe I should add myself to some waiting lists again and exchange it, because we try to make a full ring video here and not a short-handed one. So I go back to the tables here, the table list, try to find some okay table. This one here might do it. The main thing I'm doing if I choose a table is that I try to avoid tables with too many short stacks. But here we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big stacks, and he is not really short, so this table will do it. And since I'm under the gun here, I can basically mug this table and put the new one here and continue my play. Yes. Now we have 4 tables again, and possibly we'll get some hands. I'm having my poker tracker run in the background. Just realized I have not voluntarily put money in the pot in a single hand so far, which of course is pretty tight. Here we of course wait for the big blind, since it's just one round to me. I'm doing this of course also in the video. A, because it's right, and B, because it doesn't take a long time. Maybe if I was like in MP2 or MP3 position and would have to wait a lot of time until I can enter the table, I would maybe post the blind just to have more action in this video, but it would be wrong in a mathematical sense, in a game theoretic way of playing, because posting the blind in middle position is just stupid. You can post your blind depending on the amount of players at the table. You can post your blind in the big blind or in the cutoff, but you shouldn't post your blind in middle position. Here, small pocket pair, somebody already entered the pot, so we just limp and try to see a cheap flop. Didn't work, so we have to calculate down if we can call or not. We have to call 18 cents. 18 times 20 is like 360, so it's close because he has 375 left. So I'm calling here for set value. Obviously not hitting. So I'm basically just folding my hand. Even if we bet small, I don't like calling or raising him here. Calling would be bad because we just have an underpair on a kind of drawing board. He might have a lot of equity against us, even if he does not have a speed, and we of course can't stand a second barrel. And I don't like raising him here because people don't like folding in those spots. A hand that is at least worth top pair, maybe he won't even fold worth like pocket queens or something. So I just fold here. I basically really call here to make a set, play with a set, and fold if I don't get it. Here we raise, of course. We'll make it 32 we'll make it, because, well, we have 20, 24, 28 for the limpers, and then I add an extra big blind because I'm out of position against every single player in this hand who can call. It just decreases the mistakes I can make post-flop a bit because the pot gets bigger. This is kind of good flop. Obviously we are way beat by every 6, but it's pretty unlikely somebody has a 6 cold calling like 8 big blinds pre-flop with his hand, so I'm definitely not folding. The question is where to get the most of his money. Do we get it on the flop or on the turn? I think I just put it in here. Maybe he has an overpair himself and gets scared by the turn card. A flush on the turn is nothing really scary for us because we do have the redraw, so even if a club comes on the turn and he does have clubs, we still have like 7 flush outs to make the nut flush and 4 full house outs. So we still have 11 outs left even if we get beat by the flush. So that's not too scary. The question is just, is he paying us off better on the flop or on the turn? We could as well call on the flop and then lead the turn again or something like this. But I think that worse hands will get scared by the turn way more often than they like the turn and be more inclined to pay me off with the turn card. In this situation, it was indeed exactly what I described, because if the turn came a club or an ace, king, queen, jack, he might have still found a fold in his hand. But on the flop he didn't, so putting it in on the flop was best here. That's what I meant. If he has a worse hand that can pay us off, he will be more likely to do that on the flop than on the turn. So I decided to put it in on the flop. Even if my hand would have allowed to just call the flop and then put some money in on the turn, because no matter what the turn card is, I'm not making much of a mistake. So I could as well have waited. The question is if he can wait or if he prefers to put money in on the flop, which he did actually. Well, that was kind of interesting, I think. At least I do feel like it was. To me it appears like it was. Of course, sometimes you do go broke to a 6 here. That is no question. You do. But it's just way more likely for your opponent to have like a smaller overpair than we do, or maybe a flush draw if he's raising us on the turn, on the flop here, than having a 6, just because he was the big blind, I was the small blind. I raised 32 cents, which is 8 big blinds, and he cold called 7 big blinds pre-flop. And there normally are not many hands that cold call 7 big blinds pre-flop that contain a 6. Possibly pocket 6s, so 2 quads, well, I lose, nice hand. But a single 6 is not contained by many hands. Well, once again, the table on my lower left is going to break down. So I once again need a new table here, which I'm actually doing right now. Or at least trying. Should deactivate auto post before I post the blind I don't want to post. Well, we sit out here since we're trying to make a full ring video, playing those real though the real short-handed games makes no sense. This table unfortunately is full. Yes. Maybe this one isn't. Oh, come on! This software is sometimes so slow that in the list tables appear to have open seats that actually don't have open seats, which kind of sucks for me. But I can't change it. This time I got one. So once again, this table is being changed. And we immediately get right back into the action, and I can think of another table that can be replaced. It's this one because we still have 2, 4, 6, 7, 6 players left. It's also short-handed. Well, sorry for this, but obviously it's not my fault. I can't do much. Nobody wants to play a full ring game. I'm sorry though. Well, the starting hands chart. I'll try to say something about the starting hands chart, unless I get some action. Well, why is the starting hands chart necessary, and why is the starting hands chart good? Well, you have two reasons to play after the starting hands chart. The first one is it saves you time. It just tells you what to do. You usually would have to think about situations where you ask your starting hands chart whether or not to take to make a certain action or not. And if you just use your chart, it's just like you have to make one look instead of whoops, this was a wrong click. I actually wanted to wait, because it avoids making mistakes, and it as well saves you time. It avoids making mistakes in a way that you usually you could make mistakes without the starting hands chart, just because you're not as experienced as those people who made this chart for you are, because you haven't, of course, played like, I don't know, 500,000, 1 million, or 5 million of fans of poker, and of course you then are not as experienced as the people who made this chart, and of course you would make possible mistakes. And if you didn't have this chart, even if you tried to do your best all of the time and thought about every situation pretty well, which of course would take a lot of time, which is the second factor I mentioned, because you still could make wrong conclusions with your process of thought. So I highly recommend to everybody that you make that you think of your own play all of the time, that you ask yourself what to do, and then try to look at some charts or some standards, or standard lines or whatever, because thinking on your own will help your game. In a short-term way, it's of course very important that you don't make mistakes, because mistakes will cost you money, and you don't have much usually online. If you play after the bankroll management, you have a pretty tight bankroll management. You have a pretty loose bankroll management, where you more or less need like every stack you do have, and offering money of this would easily make you go broke. So mistakes, especially in the short-term period, in a short-term point of view, should be avoided by every meaning. But in the long-term point of view, you should of course also increase your skill of playing poker yourself, because on higher limits there are no charts that always tell you what's right to do, because there can be several actions that achieve different things, but all are more or less right. You can't really say this is right and this is wrong, and you should get a feeling for this. And this feeling won't come if you don't think of your play, and if you don't put your own play into question. So using this chart is right and is highly recommended by me and by Poker Strategy. But what is also highly recommended is that you make your own thoughts about playing and stuff. You can, of course, you can discuss it with other people, which helps. You can post it in the forums, your thoughts, even if it's like wrong, but you thought it was right. You learned something by somebody explaining you why your thought process maybe was wrong. Nobody says everything you do is correct, but if it's not correct, I would always ask somebody to tell me why. I might make a mistake, of course, but I want somebody to show me why the mistake actually was a mistake. So here we had a hand played by starting hands chart, and not much to comment on. Still raising a suited ace out of the cutoff. Should be pretty standard, and once again my table breaks. But this time I'll stay. I think we still have 7 people left, and I just hope somebody else joins us, because I'm tired of just changing the table all the time, because it gets me out of the flow. It always takes some time to get back then. Well, this of course, what I just mentioned is the reason for you. You should always use this chart as a beginner, because it helps you, but in the long term, in the long run, you should get away from it, or you should at least try to understand it. You should try to understand why certain actions are good, especially for beginners. And at some point, you should even think of, am I still a beginner that much that I do have to use this chart for every action I do, or can I maybe play some situations a little bit different? Before you get me wrong, I'm saying this clearly. This point is not when you played 2000 hands and won 2 stacks. This is not the point where you should say, well, I'm advanced enough, now I can decide on my own, and I decide that this 8-9 suited will be raised if he calls, because they just both fold. No. A, this is the wrong play, and B, this is the wrong time to make. You can't say, hey, I played 2000 hands, now I'm the godfather of poker, and I am doing this so well. I decided now. This makes no sense, and this period of time I mentioned is more like 50,000 hands, or at least 20,000 hands or something, depending on how good you adapt to this. Well, here we have a hand. I let a flush draw into 2 people, got a call in one spot. Now I make my flush and get minimum raised, which can mean a lot. I think I will just put it in here because, well, of course I just 3-bet him. I still expect some hands to raise me here that I do have beat. Possible straights, 2 pairs, maybe a slow rolling set that picks the total wrong time to raise me. Of course, sometimes he has what he has, like a better flush, but flush over flush, of course, can come to you, and I don't see another way playing this hand, because just calling the turn would be pretty bad with my hand, because many hands can kill my hand if I was still ahead, and I'm of course losing some value by worth hands. If he has, let's say, a set, if I just call the turn and the river brings a spade, I'm not getting any action. If the river brings a pair, I'm dead. And if the river brings a blank, I won't be able to go all in usually, because the pot is too small. So I do have to re-raise on the turn, even though I might be beat by a bigger flush. Which, as I said, is of course happening, but for even less than 100 big blinds. I'm not really considering folding or just calling. I don't see a way to get away from this hand in any way. Pocket threes, first in out of late position. We raise here, steal raise. Of course we don't really raise our hand for value here because pocket threes don't have that much value, but we still raise them because we do have an edge against our opponents if we play in position. Possibly a heads up pot in position is always something good because you make a lot of money there. If you have Poker Tracker and you use one special filter which says, well, what's this actual name? If you filter on the first page of Poker Tracker, if you filter by chance to steal blinds, you filter to chance to steal and raised. You will see that this is maybe the situation where you win the most money, because there you will have like between like 50 or maybe 100 big blinds per 100 hands, which is like ridiculously much if you look at your average win rate, which will be hopefully between 0 and maybe 8 Poker Tracker big bets. So you see in those steal situations you win maybe even more than 10 times of the average winning, not considering your hand. And well, this of course leads us to the fact that steal raises win you a lot of money, and you should often try to steal raise, but you shouldn't overdo it, because if you raise with 2 bad hands, you once get to the point that you will never ever be able to how do I say this, to fight back if somebody gives you action because your hand is too weak. And on the other hand, you will get much more action if you steal raise a ridiculous amount, because people tend not to believe you then anymore. So this is just two contradictory parts, because on one hand your hands get weaker, and on the other hand you get more action, which is nothing you want. Either you want stronger hands and action, or you want weaker hands, or you want weaker hands and less action. If I get less action and can steal more, it's okay, because without action I win a lot of pots. But if I have weak hands and action, of course I will maybe not lose, but I won't win much money in those situations. That's why you shouldn't overdo it with those steal raises. Can win you a lot of money, but they can also make you lose. And on the other hand, it can be very tricky sometimes to realize when or when not somebody is actually playing back and when somebody is just having a hand. This is often pretty hard even for an advanced player, because it's really hard to differentiate between people playing back and between people having a real hand and just like raising you for value pre-flop or post-flop. This is something where you need a lot of experience. Well, I'm still waiting on some lists, but I don't come through. Can maybe add some tables to my waiting list, so this gets a bit faster, because actually we don't want to play a short-handed game like down here. We want to have a full ring table. I already mentioned that before. So I'm basically adding every table more or less to the waiting list. Now we waited through one. Take the maximum, and this table is not great, but okay. And since here we are just another gun, I fold my hand and replace the table. And we have 4 tables again for a few more minutes. Well, this session I'm playing really tight, not getting many hands. With a VPIP of like 5%, I'm playing even tighter than a usual short stack does. But well, of course, for a hand period of 100 hands, this means like nothing. I already made videos with the same starting hand start where I had an VP/IP of like over 15 because I just had a good run of cards. So this doesn't mean much, obviously. I'm removing myself from the other waiting lists again, so those windows don't pop up every time. Fold, 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 fold. Nothing else to do right now. Well, I hope those 4 tables give enough action to you to follow and to find this interesting. I once got some bad criticism on a video of mine where people criticized the fact that there wasn't enough action. I do have to apologize for this, but it's not, obviously it's not my fault because I can't change it. If I don't get any hands and if I don't get into interesting situations, those videos become very hard to make interesting, and sometimes it just didn't work. I'm sorry if this is the fact, but if this is the case right now, but okay. Well, here we have an ace queen offsuit and we get re-raised. It's kind of tightish, but I'm gonna fold. I tell you why. Well, of course we could call here. The main reason for a call are just the odds, because it's just a minimum re-raise and we do have position. That's good. Actually, there are also some things that are bad. As a matter of fact, I open raised from middle position or from another gun. I'm actually not sure. From early middle position or from another gun. And he was the big blind. He was the only player left. There was no dead money or something to steal. So him being loose for other reasons, him re-raising me for other reasons than for value, makes not much sense. Interesting. The 2-paired board and the small blind leads out for full pot. Here I'm going to fold because it's pretty much possible that he does have a deuce, because he is a small blind after 2 limpers. He can complete some hands with that contain a deuce, and he can reasonably check them on the flop and on the turn net. He can of course reasonably lead the river, so his whole line makes sense. And even if ace high does have showdown value on 2-paired boards, in this particular case I do believe him. I do believe that he does often enough have a hand that is stronger than my ace high, which is obviously just a bluff catcher. Pocket jacks out of the small blind, also possibly being played. Obviously being played. One other hand where I'm raising the usual amount of 5 big blinds after 1 limper and 1 extra big blind because I'm out of position. It's just not making that big of a difference, but it decreases the possible mistake you make post-flop a little bit, because the pot will be a little bit bigger. And with pocket jacks here, of course, I expect to be ahead, and the money that goes in pre-flop is usually good for me and bad for the opponent, of course, because I do have the edge pre-flop. And the bigger the pot is, the smaller the mistake is I can make. If, let's take a hard example, if we have 1,000 big blinds and I call a 4 big blind raise, the pot will be on the flop. If we are heads up, the pot will be like, if we're not in the blinds, a little bit less than 10 big blinds, 9.5 exactly. So since we both have almost 1,000 big blinds left, it's 100 times. So I can make a mistake of 100 times the pot post flop if I put my money in wrong. I hope you get what I mean. And if, on the other hand, if there is a pre-flop raise of like 900 96 big blinds. Of course, then I can just make a mistake that is worth like 1 over 100 of the pot, which is ridiculously small. So obviously then I can't make much of a mistake. Obviously in the situation where the normal preflop raise was 4 big blinds and we are 1,000 big blinds deep, of course I can make an incredibly big mistake post flop, where in the other situation I can't make much of a mistake at all. So the bigger the pot is, the smaller the mistake is I can make. So of course bloating up the pot preflop with a hand that's likely best usually is a good play. And if it gets more likely, you will make mistakes post flop because you're out of position, for example. It might sound like a good idea to put more money in preflop. Of course you should not do this based on your hand. You should not, like, I don't know, raise more with aces and kings than you do with ace king and jacks and tens, for example, because you raise them all out of position against limpers, but you decide that you want to re-raise your aces and your kings more, for example. This makes no sense because possibly somebody is getting behind this, finding out that you do this, and of course can more or less correctly read you then pre-flop. So he does know if you raise your extra big blind, he pretty much puts you on aces and kings and can act very well against it, because if he knows your hand more or less, and if he knows you maybe too as a player, it gets ridiculously hard for you to play and to make a good play, because he always can decide if the flop that comes is one where you're going to throw away your aces or kings, and if it's one where you won't throw them away, and he then can play his hands that he wants to play for value, as well as those hands he wants to bluff you with. He can play both of them perfectly, which of course is a pretty bad thing for you, and which of course is the reason why you shouldn't do this. So if you raise this extra big blind, you should raise it with every hand you're raising, or with none, but not, you shouldn't base the size of your raise on your hand pre-flop, because you get readable. Well, slowly we're coming to an end. This video, I think I more or less broke even. I won a big part with aces against tens, you might remember. And then I lost a big part with flush over flush. And that's been basically it with the bigger pots I played. 1-1, lose 1 makes more or less a break-even play. Here we have pocket nines out of middle position. This is also a situation where the starting hands chart is pretty tight. We wouldn't raise this hand out of middle position. You could of course think of raising pocket nines here, but to make categories in the starting hands chart, you had to put pocket nines somewhere, and we decided that pocket nines do in fact are less strong, of course, than pocket jacks and pocket tens, so we put them to the small pocket pairs. And of course you wouldn't raise pocket deuces from here. That's why you don't raise your pocket nines. Well, this is a situation against the preflop aggressor on such a flop. I'm often checking behind ones because it looks pretty suspicious what he's doing. So I check behind on the flop. If he checks the turn again, I'm betting, and I'm of course betting if I hit my set. So check min raises me. I'm 3-betting here. Of course I can run into a bigger set. He can have aces or jacks here, but on the other hand, he can have as well be playing an ace king, ace queen, ace jack, flush draw kind of hand or so. So I'm raising him here pretty big, since we do have some money behind, and if he re-raises me again, I'm putting it in. It's no problem to me. And if he just calls, I'm now thinking if I shove the river or if I just value bet it. But since this hand played out so strange, I think just putting it in is okay. It's just one pot size bet, and I think he will call me with a hand like ace king or ace queen or so. So if he folds here, I expect him to be having either a real weak hand like a jack or something, maybe getting kind of fancy on the turn and then calling the turn as considering himself on a draw. So he might have called the turn with a pair that's not top pair to make two pair or trips, and then folding on the river. Or he might as well, of course, have a flush draw or some busted straight draw that just check folds the river. Where of course I wouldn't have won more money with a smaller bet. Well, now I think it's a good point to stop this video. 40 minutes is the goal time. I hope some interesting hands were contained here and you had a good time watching it. I would be happy if you maybe watched my other videos or maybe visit me in my coaching. If you have any questions considering this video, I think it's best if you ask me personally, maybe in the coaching or via ICQ or Skype. And feel free to ask me. I'll try to answer in the best way I can. Yes, as I said, now it's over. Goodbye.